Dr. Jazz.
I'm in Slovenia. I'm in former Yugoslavia.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, like Europe, like between Ljubljana and Zagreb and Vienna, Budapest, kind of that.
Oh my goodness. I haven't been to Zagreb. Ooh, long time. Split and all those. Yeah.
Oh, you played? Oh, sure, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, being playing music and teaching and all that. So and I love doing this. I just started doing these talks with musicians during COVID, and now it's kind of gotten out of hand because it's more than 350 musicians already. So it's like,
Well, it's late at night. Was it about 10 o'clock or?
yeah, it's 10, yeah. So my daughter is sleeping and my wife is reading a book and she's like, man, again one of these. I was like, yeah, sorry. No, but I'll just jump in. I wanted to ask you, you know, I listened to Celebration today, and
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
and I really love it. I mean, I wanted to start this talk with you as a composer, and how do you write the music, or let's say for this project, how you have written the music, or also in the past? I mean, what's usually your process in writing a composition like?
Well, the process is it's so different for me. I mean, but Celebration, actually, the CD is a culmination of. It first came out on vinyl. You probably
yeah.
read that, and then we had the pandemic, and then but what was really nice about this situation for me was that my contract was after 2 years release, the audio reverted back to me, and because initially, I mean, it did well, I think, but it was targeting audiophile people,
yeah,
mostly, and so it still was a kind of a new recording a few years later, which I'm happy to say, and so we added 2 more pieces with the strings, and to fill it out, and 1 piece that we didn't actually have time to put on the vinyl because minutes are crucial on the vinyl, you know. So that was nice, but I've always wanted to do something with strings, and my friend and pianist Steve Allee, we're very close, and he's a great composer and arranger himself. So I said, well, why don't you do one and I'll do the rest, and it turned out really, really well, and I'm very happy to have put it out like this, and so the new piece is kind of what we call a bookend. But Celebration, the tune itself is wasn't brand new, but with the strings, it just added a whole nother type to it, you know.
Yeah,
I'm glad you like it.
It's like also Celestial Dance. I think you did that like 30 years ago or 20 years, and this
right. But with this, with the strings, a different approach, and I think, you know, all of us as composers, whatnot, you should try, if you got something that seemingly works, try to put it in some other kind of format. And I mean, if it works well in one, it'll probably work well in another situation. So that worked out really, really nice, and it actually surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they didn't expect. I don't know what they expected, to be quite honest. But we had fun. The Sirius Quartet, these guys really can play, and they have their own thing happening, which is wonderful too. But they really, they were happy that we wrote music for them instead of pads.
Yeah, that's true.
And the record people were, particularly with the vinyl, he was really happy that he wanted the strings. That was really nice, because he wanted me to do something I had never done before. And so when I mentioned strings, his eyes just lit up. I said, really? And but he was also afraid that maybe it would be this really pretty slurpy.
Sometimes. Yeah.
And I didn't want that. I had much more respect for the players, but I just I've been listening to this what is the album with Bill Evans and Klaus Overman. I don't know if you know that album.
Yeah.
From the late 60s.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And the writing, I mean, and that was the first time I'd heard anything quite like that. And of course, it fit Bill Evans's touch and the way he would play the piano. And I still listen to it. It's still very beautiful to listen to now. So I was hoping that this would not to compare, but to just wanted to live a while,
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. You did it. I mean, it adds to your tunes a different. It's like adding an unexpected herb when you're cooking. It's like, man, what is that?
Yeah, right.
It's a nice taste, So it's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I appreciate that, because it's hard to come out here with just to record, just to record. It should document where I am, at this juncture in my career, and I've been playing a while, so I wanted to do something different,
Yeah, definitely. Are you otherwise still writing music nowadays? I mean, if ideas pop up and...
Oh, I'm still writing.
Okay.
Oh, for sure. I mean, to me, my writing has become even more deeper than ever before. Because I just finished. This coming August, because I've been writing things that aren't quote unquote jazz. So I have a string quartet that hasn't. It's just been recorded, but it hasn't been released yet, and a string orchestra piece that's going to be premiered in August 25th and 27th in where is it? West Virginia. It's called the Appalachian Chamber Music Festival, and there was a wonderful young bassist by the name of Samo Šalamon, primarily a classical player, but he plays with the sensibilities of Jocko.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. So, I mean, he understands all the harmonics and and he writes beautiful music. So he and I stay in touch, and I sent him, because he also teaches at a university somewhere. So I said, check it out, and he gave it to these people in West Virginia, and he said, since it's a string orchestra, they actually, I guess they looked at the score because I didn't send in parts or anything, and he emailed me back and said they programmed it. I said, get out of here. So, so I'm really looking forward to hearing that. But I mean, I'm trying. I'm going to be in London next February doing something at the Guildhall School of Music, and they've been playing my big band music and
oh wow, beautiful.
Some of that stuff. So I've been trying to spread my wings, so to speak, compositionally. It's still, I just like to write. It's come late in my life, hence the string writing and stuff with the trio, and the big band stuff has been doing that for a while, but that's not typical either. You know, the style and whatnot. So people, I don't know if you've seen the recording or heard the recording of Quiet Pride, the Elizabeth Catlett project.
Yeah. And oh, bless you.
Excuse me.
Yes.
But that was written, inspired by a sculptor, and that French horns and vocalese and it came out pretty well, and I was real happy about that. So that was actually the beginning of, people didn't really realize I was writing to that degree, that level. Yeah, they liked my playing, but they didn't. I think if you heard it and nobody told you who wrote it, my name wouldn't come up. You know.
Yeah. Also with this one, I mean, with Celebration, you would be like, I mean, you would recognize, of course, the bass playing when you start a tune, or I'd be like, okay, that's Rufus probably. But like with you, if I heard just the strings, when it starts with the strings, I'd be like, man, what is this? You wouldn't recognize it. I mean,
yeah, well, great. That makes me, that's the best compliment you could. Yeah, thank you.
And it's beautiful modern arrangements, and I mean, it's nice. It's fantastic that you have this energy just to, you know, continue exploring, and it's beautiful. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, this is the energy that music gives us, you know, when you get inspired. And I just heard some young players, I mean, 25 years old, here in New York, and then some of the in Chicago. I do this workshop with this great pianist Billy Childs and Steve Wilson, and we listen to these young players that are kind of invited to come, but they have to play really well, but it's all about composition. So it's at the end of the 7 or 8 days that they're there, they all play original music, sometimes written that week, and 15 people. So it's very small and very intimate, and wow, it's so exciting. You know, I learn this more than they do, I think, you know, but we're there just as extra ears, you know, coaching. We don't play. We just kind of mentor or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Wow. Nice. Yeah. It's scary how many amazing musicians are out there. It's that's really, you know, of all ages. Like just the level nowadays, it's so good. Like in any town you go in Europe or in the States, and you find players.
It's good, and I mean unfortunately, it's not the same as, you know, the playing field has changed since I was that age or whatever, and the pandemic and all the the virus and everything just kind of messed up everything. So, but the players who are still creative and they're confident and they're aggressive about what they do, yourself, I mean, you're playing, but you added this part of it, which is, it's got to creep into your playing some kind of way, inspired by the people that you interview, the people that, you know. So it's, to me, it's fantastic, you know.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's like there are some positive things even after this COVID thing, you know, like for me, this is like when I talk to you guys, it's just like, you know, I'm like a kid in a sandbox or something, you know, like I have albums and, you know, I hear you musically or seen many of you live, and then, you know, you hear you explain how you do things, and it's just like being a composer and musician, it's also so inspiring, you know, just to hear you guys, and it's beautiful, man. So I always appreciate it. So, but Rufus, I wanted to ask you, mentioned that the playing field changed, and if we go now back, like let's say 60 years, and I've read, you know, when you were in college, you started playing with all these amazing players who basically, you know, founded the music almost. And how did this story happen with you, that you got into jazz and playing with everyone, like in the 60s?
You know, I don't, well, I didn't go to college right away out of high school. I went and I was in the military for 5 years. Okay. And I was a trumpet player.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And that was my job. I was in the Air Force band. And at the time, I was either going to get drafted or not. And my mother, I was 17 years old, and my mother had to sign for me because you had to be 18 to do whatever. And so I said, a trumpet or a rifle, you know, and of course, you know, the trumpet won out, and so she signed and I went in. But for me, it was the best thing ever happened to me, because I became a better trumpet player, but I also began to teach myself the bass, because I always had an infatuation for the bass. And I didn't know that for a couple of years afterwards, but because I loved listening to it, and then I would, when I played in a band and we took a break, I would always go to the bass and just kind of mess around with it. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and so I began to teach myself. But I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and I heard Ike and Tina Turner's band, and that blew my head off.
Wow, okay.
That was amazing. And then I saw James Brown's band live, and he was beating up two drummers even then. And then I saw Bobby Blue Bland, which was a different kind of big band, and it was pretty amazing. In Montgomery, Alabama, we're talking now in the late, in the mid 60s, during not a really nice time.
No, sure.
But during the volatile time there, when I heard all this music and I was listening, and I got a chance to play with some of the older guys who were 30 at that time. But they liked my feel. But I didn't know. I mean, I had to learn how to read bass clef, you know. But then I went to Japan because they offered me to go again, and I had no reason not to. And that was when it really hit. That's when I saw Ray Brown live, Oscar Peterson Trio, and I saw Philly Joe Jones and Duke Ellington's band and the Modern Jazz Quartet. And I said, wow, that's what I want to do. Of course, I didn't know how difficult or what that was. But, and then I said, I got to go back to school after I got out and get me a teacher to really teach me how to play the bass, not jazz,
Okay.
but just the bass. Because in the classical way, there's like 400 years of documentation and everything. And so the whole world started to open up to me, and Chicago was where I ended up being, going back to school. And Chicago was like, whoa, every week I was playing with somebody from out of town, either from New York or from LA or from any other city. And that was my school. That's really where I learned how to play. And that was also where my first boss was, Eddie Harris.
That's how you met Eddie. Okay, I wanted to ask you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he was from Chicago, and I was in his band. And I met him. I said, "I love your music, man," because when I was in Japan, I heard this Freedom Jazz Dance record.
Yeah, sure.
The In Sound or something with Ron Carter and Billy Higgins and Cedar Walton. Man, I played the grooves off of that record. And so I told him how much I really enjoyed him and his music. He said, "But you're in school." I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, you stay in school, finish school, get that over with. All this stuff will be out here. Don't worry about it."
Okay.
Which was because sometimes people will say, "Well, yeah, come on, play." And I was hungry enough to eat, to play. I probably would have quit school, with a year just to go, which would have been stupid, and he knew that. So that was very interesting that he cared that I, but Chicago, wow. Chicago, we moved to New York 1976.
Okay.
So Chicago actually prepared me to become more successful in New York. Because if you didn't swing, you didn't work. If you didn't know any tunes, you didn't work. Your name was not at the top of the list, and Chicago had everything. It had the, Chicago Symphony Orchestra, the art ensemble. I mean, and of course, the AACM. I don't know if you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, Muhal, Richard Abrams, and I were with Eddie Harris together, and so basically playing with Eddie Harris taught me not to be afraid of music, any kind of music. And so I tell a lot of students, I said, if you can't put something down if you can't play it. If you don't like it, that's one thing, but you can't say it's not good if you really can't deal what it is. And I've been very fortunate to meet people who just, keep it up, and
Yeah. Like, did you also in Chicago hook up with Dexter Gordon?
No. Well, yes, I did play with. He would come in from Europe, and he would play a weekend.
Okay, like that.
But it's funny. I made a record with him in Chicago. But when I moved to New York, which was a few years later, he didn't remember, that I had played with him in Chicago. But when they were trying to put a band together for him after he came back, and then he got this really record contract, you
Yeah.
know, they needed a bass player because he was playing, basically it was Woody Shaw's band. And Woody said, you can't take my band, you know, you have to get your own band. So that's, we got the new record, the first recording. It was, got me, Victor Lewis, George Cable, Bobby Hutcherson, all that. And that was the beginning. That was the real beginning of my tenure with Dexter and that quartet, which I'm still reaping the benefits of having been in that group. You
know? How was it like touring with those guys? I mean, basically since it was a band, I mean, like
it was fantastic. I mean, we were very busy at that time. We were on the road like 8 months out of the year.
Oh man,
it was crazy. Not completely continued, but pretty busy because the office, it was Dexter, Johnny Griffins, and Woody Shaw. 3 bands were working out of the same office, and the telephone was just ringing off the hook. So
okay, that's incredible.
Busy time, yeah.
Wow. Was it with Dexter? You went to Europe also for the first time?
No, my first time to Europe was with Harold Land and Bobby Hutcherson.
Ah, wow, really? Okay.
Yeah, that was actually one of my graduation gifts from the college, because they came into Chicago and played a week, and that's and I guess they liked the way I played. But what was really great about that, they demanded a rehearsal. I mean, a real rehearsal, because they had vibes. He was very particular, whoever was playing piano, to have the right voicings with the vibes and things. And they were original tunes. And I thought that was very impressive, because almost everybody else that would come through, we'd rehearse, but it was like maybe 2 hours before we actually started to play. Do you know this song?
Yeah, go through some
we'll play it in this key, and that's fine. And if you didn't know the song, and it was fun. It was fantastic. But when they came in, they demanded a rehearsal the day before. I said, what's that going to be like? So, and it was fantastic. And so then they called and said, would you like to go to Europe? We got a 5 or 6 week tour.
Wow, man.
And that was the first time. And I was able to, I had just gotten married not too long before that. And so she came with, and I didn't come home with hardly any money, but we made the trip together, and that was fantastic. That was fantastic. Playing with Bobby Hutcherson and Harold Land, but Bobby Hutcherson is one of the most underrated,
I agree,
unbelievable musicians. And Harold Land too was super. It was very different from when he used to play with Clifford Brown, you know. And we became very close friends to that. But man, Mr. Hutcherson was
such a composer also. I mean, I love
yes. And all that music was all original stuff, and it was it was so much fun. But it also was very informative about traveling on the road, how to keep yourself kind of up so you can play these gigs, and And traveling, it's not as easy as it sounds, you know. And I'm sure you know, but just
When
to
was
be
that?
where?
When was that?
When was that? 1971.
71. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, 71, 70. I think, yeah. Let me see.
Wow.
Maybe it was 72, 72. Yeah, and that was my first time I've actually seen these major festivals in Italy, and we would drive where I remember this one where we were driving and it was dark and it was a bus ride, and all of a sudden we get to this place, and all of a sudden it just opened up, and it was in Pescara.
Oh yeah, sir. Yeah.
And right on the water there, and we passed where the venue was, like so many lights, and people were screaming and yelling, and I said, "Wow, what is this?" And so that was the beginning, you know.
That's amazing. Yeah. I can just imagine you know, like also traveling in the 70s with you know, with the borders and currencies and
oh boy,
way different, you know, like,
changing. And then of course I had we had the big mummy case for the bass, you know, and they had back then we carried drums.
Yeah. Oh
and
man.
He carried he didn't have his vibes. This is one thing I learned. Deacon had come up with this electric vibes, but nobody told Bobby not to plug it in until you have a transformer.
Oh yeah.
So the first gig, plug it in, and smoke rises off the, you know. and we were carrying Fender Rhodes. I mean, it was crazy.
Oh man.
On and off the trains.
Man. Okay.
And the promoter did have a car to meet us to take some of the heavy stuff. But it was
still, yeah.
It was a lot of fun. But when I think about it, it was really hard work. You know, it wasn't as easy as that sounds. You know, but once we got on the bandstand, all that went away. You know.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Yeah, I know that like everyone carried. I did this talk the other day with Pat LaBarbera, and he said like when they toured with Elvin in the 70s. Yeah, they carried their own drums as well, Elvin.
Yeah,
know, like on trains and stuff. I was like, man, really?
Yeah. I mean, nobody was paying for it at that time. Nobody really. A lot of things had changed about the equipment and hotels and all that kind of stuff. Like, because actually Harold Land and we, you know, they paid the hotels, they paid everything. And I said, wow, they got a lot of money. Wow. You know, little did I know they were losing their shirts, you know. But I still have great memories of that time.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Going to Switzerland, having croissants and you know, real coffee and cream. Oh man, fantastic! Yeah,
it's even nowadays the same. Like when you sometimes, you know, when I have a tour and then you present the guys the tour schedule, and everyone sees like, you know, 4 gigs in Italy, and everyone's like, yeah, you know, Italy, you know, good food, wine, and
yeah.
And then there are some other countries, I will not name them, and they're like, yeah, okay.
Right.
I like that, yeah. But Rufus, why did you decide to move to New York?
That's a good question. I've always wanted to come to New York. Mainly when people came from New York And to come from LA to everybody who came from New York brought something that nobody else brought.
Mm.
And when they left, it was like they took it with them, you know. And I said, I need that.
Yeah.
And actually, it was Harold Land and Bobby Hutcherson. It was Bobby Hutcherson, you know, because I guess maybe my last 2 years, a year and a half in Chicago, work started, you know, the economy changed a little bit, and I wasn't working with those kinds of gigs.
Mm.
But I was working because the city had a lot of wonderful musicians, and we did all kinds of things. But I was playing this jazz showcase with Joe Siegel's Jazz Showcase, and that was the jazz place.
Yeah.
And so when Bobby and Harold came in, and everybody else came through there, McCoy came through there, blah, blah, blah. And but this last year and a half, it was not much happening. And then one weekend, Bobby came back with just a quartet.
Mm.
And I was excited. Now, you know, I made the tour with them and they were happy with me, but that was like 2 years before. And so I really, when he came on, the first night was Friday. We did Friday, Saturday matinee, Saturday night, Sunday matinee, and Sunday night.
Well,
Friday night, I knew my stuff wasn't there. And I said, oh, I wasn't happy. I did the gig okay, but I didn't really do the gig. And the next Saturday afternoon, it was a little bit better. And Saturday night was a little bit better. Sunday, I almost got to where it should be. And so at the end, you know, Bobby comes to pay us. And he says, what's up, Rufus? He says, your shit is down. And I said, I knew it, but I didn't want him to know it. But of course he knows it because he remembered how it was before. So he said, and I was almost in tears. It was almost like he took a big old baseball bat and hit me upside my head, you know. And I went home and I told my wife, I said, we're out of here. I said, you know, I was so destroyed, you know, and it still took a couple years for us to really go, because moving,
yeah,
you know, it's not all that easy. And so when I saw Bobby on that Dexter Gordon record date, which was maybe 3 years later, he remembered. He's like, hey, well, your stuff's not down now. You know, he remembered, you know. But I love him to this day because he cared enough to bust me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, most people wouldn't say anything to you, you know. And we laughed about it when he was still alive, because I played with him not a lot after, because he lived in California. So, but to make a long story short, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me in terms of moving to. I'd always wanted to go to New York because all the energy, and then every time someone came, they took it back. And I said, oh man. But then when that happened with Bobby Hutcherson, that was just a reassurance of I needed to go. And that was the best thing for me since, and I've been here ever since.
Sure. What was it heavy in the beginning? when you moved to New York? Like,
well, it took a while. I was still on the road a little bit with Dexter. So,
yeah.
And I had, prior to Dexter, I was still doing some gigs with the singer Nancy Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's the one actually where I made it possible for me to, because one of my gigs with her, one of my last gigs with her, then was with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band, which was actually the first group that I actually was seen with in New York. That was a very unique opportunity for me. So ever since then, things have been, pretty good.
Yeah, that's an understatement. I mean, if I look at the amount of records, I mean, I wanted to ask you this. You kind of mentioned it before already, like setting foot in all areas of, let's call it jazz in this case. Like you played kind of standards and avant-garde and everything in between. Like, how did you end up in these situations? Especially connecting, I don't know, with Anthony Braxton and Henry Threadgill on one side. I mean, I love that stuff. And Jack DeJohnette in between here, and so many.
Well, I get it. I mean, I understand that. People ask me, do I change the way I play with different people? I say, yes, I play with them.
Yeah.
I mean, playing with Jack DeJohnette was really like playing in two bands, because when he played piano, I had plenty of room. It was like a chamber ensemble. And then when he played drums, there was no harmony, and the harmony was up to me so it was, I had a lot of room to create different kinds of sounds. So that was, plus he was so powerful as a drummer. He made me play things I didn't even know I could play, there's such power. And, but then also playing with Dexter Gordon, playing with Eddie Gladden, I haven't played with a drummer quite like that since. But Mulhall, Richard Abrams, and I played a lot obviously with Eddie Harris, but Mulhall, the founder of the AACM, and he was very encouraging about writing way back then. And he said, "You want to see a tune I'm working on?" I said, "Oh, yeah, it'd be great." I used to go by his house in the morning, because his kids and his wife went to work, and he would be playing Maple Leaf Rag, and Scott Joplin, just playing the mess out of it. He says, "Oh, let me show you what I've been writing." And then it was like, whoa. I mean, it was like going to Pluto or going to outer space or somewhere. And I said, yeah, could you do that again? And he did it exactly the same way. Wow. And it was like, so it wasn't just some free, I don't know what I'm doing. He really knew, he heard things differently. And when he wrote his own, and yet he could turn around and play body and soul and play all the bebop changes and all that kind of stuff. And he was my friend for up until the day he left, and he was very encouraging for me to write back then. And then I'm writing more and more. And prior, maybe about 4 or 5 years before he passed, he heard some of my big band writing and stuff. And he encouraged me to get a notebook and sketchbook and really, catalog it I said, oh, okay. You know, and he would give me, he gave me a book, an analysis of Bartok. And he says, you'll find this interesting. That's all. And it was being around people like that, and then turning around and people like Benny Golson, I'm still very close to. He's not playing anymore. He's in his mid-90s now, but he's still there, you know, and so he's been very encouraging. And I've played and recorded with him, and you know, I feel very blessed to have had the good fortune of playing with all these great people who have taught me to just go for it, you know. And I guess now I can say the last 25 years I've been trying to write, literally rolling up my sleeves and trying to write something. I just like the process.
Yeah.
You know,
it's all about the process, right? In the end.
Yeah, and a friend of mine says, this is an eraser. He says, you know, on a good day, you have a lot of erasers, you know. And I still use pencil and paper.
Man, that's fantastic.
And I still, when I like what I have, eventually I'll dump it into the computer to hear. But I can't compose with the computer. It drives me crazy. So, and plus, most of the stuff that come up with the computer really sucks.
I know what you mean.
But the pencil and paper, I just like the process. I'm having some difficulty now with bass playing and composing. They both require a lot of time, as you know. And if you get in a zone with one, this one kind of doesn't like it, and vice versa. And I still think what I do best is play, but I'm having difficulty now trying to keep them both happy, you know.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful you started composing more. I mean, like I said, I really like it. It's such a nice addition to
well, the thing is that I'm beginning to find out that actually it was Mr. Golson. So I said, well, I'm trying to, you know, get into it. And he says, well, what you're doing is you're discovering yourself.
Mm.
Because what I have is in my brain. I have something. I've never studied it. You know, I just ask questions and I buy books and this stuff like that. But I'm learning now how to actually get it out.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the exciting part too.
You said you asked questions. Like, did you ever, you know, you played with all these amazing composers. Did you ever talk with, I don't know, Bobby Hutcherson or Andrew Hill or Muhal about composition? Or
well, Muhal a little later I did, because then we were talking about writing, but per se no. Okay. David Baker, I don't know if you know that name.
Yeah.
David Baker. Well, Dave and I were very, very close as well. And he says, you know, because he was a teacher at this university, he says, you intuitively, you have your orchestrations are, my doctoral students don't come close to what you just do naturally. I said, really? I don't even know what I'm doing. And he says, well, listen, if you really want to learn a little bit about how Bartok did something or how Bach did something, then you read a little bit about it, and you close the book and you just keep stepping. He says one of the problems we have today is the schools, especially with the European concept. If you're gonna, well, even just think, if I wrote something and it reminded you of Duke Ellington, why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
Why would I want to do that? And then I wrote this big band piece. Now, of course, you know, it was the Thad Jones group. So Bob Brookmeyer saw one of my scores, and he says, "Well, why did you do that right there?" I said, "Well, that's that trombone. I love trombones, and that's kind of what Thad would do." He says, "I know, but why did you do it? Don't do that. Find another way." Oh, okay. So every time I see something that remotely sounds familiar, I erase it quick.
Yep.
And that's the hard part, you know, because you want everything to sound good, but avoid things that immediately, because there's nothing new out here, you know. I mean, but use your own, figure out some way, another way. Don't just automatically go there, you know. That's the easy way out, you know. And that's why sometimes we have these, there's a lot of people learning how to write for big bands, and they have this formula, and they have these ways that you can voice things, and it's foolproof. Everything sounds good, but it all sounds the same, and they really don't. You know, it's not good.
No, it's like finding the voice on the instrument. It's the same.
Yes.
I mean, you don't want to sound like Wes. I mean, we had Wes, you know. I mean, sure, transcribe him, but like, don't play.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You know.
The Rufus, I want just to ask you about you mentioned Jack DeJohnette before, and how did you end up in that band? I mean, this is one of my favorite bands of his, especially, you know, with David Murray and Howard Johnson, and how you guys hooked up. And
yeah, well, I think he was looking for a bass player. Who was the guy that used to play with him? He's on, and somebody mentioned, well, you know, Jack's from Chicago too. So I think he heard my name, and he knew I was playing with Dexter Gordon, and I had done some things with Dexter. And one day he called. And I was actually I had left Dexter, and I was just kind of freelancing, and I said, "Oh yeah, let's do it." And that's basically how it happened. I was with him about 3 years.
Well, that's
and we did 3 albums, I think. And each one was really special. And my last reggae one, the last one where I played electric bass, and that was the last time I played electric bass.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
He really would like me to have played a lot more electric, you know, because he was, and so did Eddie Harris, you know, but I did both with Eddie a lot. But with Jack, I was the bass, electric bass, was turning into this other animal.
With all these,
with the finger popping and tapping and all that stuff. And I actually took a couple lessons, trying to understand a little bit, but I never had to learn it. I was still one of the few who were still playing with the double bass, particularly in Chicago. Because, yes, it is easier to play that physically. But when I played electric bass like James Jamerson.
Yeah, I love that song. Yeah.
Or Chuck Rainey, or Sly and the Family Stone, you know, that kind of stuff. And that's the groove that I was raised on. So if I'm going to play electric bass, I'm going to do that, you know. I prefer to do that. But I've never had to play electric bass. And if I didn't have the choice, I didn't, you know.
Yeah.
But I just stopped it because it changed. Everything changed. And I'm glad I made that decision.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. I will not take more of your time. I just have one more question. Like, how did you playing with Andrew Hill, if you can describe? I mean, he's one of my heroes also, you know, one of the underrated greats, I think, also. But like,
yes, he was really special. I did 2 albums with him.
Yeah, I have both of them. Yeah, I love that.
And he, how did I get? Well, I think he called me too. The first album was for Black Saint, I think, in Italy, and I'll never forget. We rehearsed in the basement of this hotel in Milan, and his songs, they look just like regular songs, you know, with good changes and interesting melodies. But when he would play them, and then all of a sudden he would just go somewhere else. And because I knew Mahal and I knew Eddie, and I just go with him. You can't fight him.
Sure.
I can't say, well, I want to play my Ray Brown shit with this. You know, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And when I started to try to play on his, I said, no, this is not working. I'm not. And then when my brain says, why don't you just play with him? Just go wherever he goes. And then all of a sudden the music just opened up, because I was stifling the music to open. And I should have known it sooner, but it took me a minute to get a lot of pain because it didn't feel good. And it's supposed to feel good. And then when I let go, and I have a friend, I don't know if you know this name, you should know that. Her name is Jane Ira Bloom.
Oh, sure. I love her. Yeah.
Well, she was in the audience when I was playing. It was at Sweet Basil.
Oh, yeah. I have the shirt back there of Sweet Basil.
And she told me, she said, Rufus, I haven't heard you play like that before. And I said, thanks, you know. And it was fantastic. He was a really nice guy. He had his own issues,
Sure.
as most people do, but I think the Italian record was better than the Blue Note record for me personally.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Greg Osby's on that one. I didn't particularly like the producer on that one. But anyway, the one in Italy with Clifford Jordan and he's a special, and Ben Riley.
Yeah, I love
we're playing,
that
and we were playing. It was fun, and then all of a sudden, on the gig, it just started to float away, and then Clifford went right with him right away. And then I said, "Well, I'm going." And so Ben Riley, bless his heart, he's playing. He says, "What's happening? What's going on?" He's still playing, swinging his ass off, but everything just kind of took off, and just it was fantastic.
Beautiful.
And, but his vehicles to play off were great, and you can play them and you can just keep them there, but that wasn't what it was all about. It was, and he had a hell of a sound on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
A beautiful touch. I heard him play a solo concert, and I had never really heard him do that before, and man, the colors and the touch, and it didn't fight. It wasn't, it wasn't ugly, and he didn't attack the piano. Totally different than Cecil Taylor, or players like that. It was just like, whoa, what a beautiful. And I still didn't know what he was doing, but it was great. And so I enjoyed. He called me the first time I rehearsed with him. We were at a loft, and I said, "Wow, this is special." I didn't know, I'd heard about him too, because I had the albums with he and Bobby Hutcherson.
Sure, yeah, that's incredible stuff. Yeah.
So I was prepared, sort of, but it's not until you play with them, The drummers that ended up playing at first time, they didn't understand him at all. It was apparent. But Ben, having played with Monk and he went with it, but it was just different for his hearing in terms of the tunes and stuff. Because Monk didn't play that way; he played in the changes. It was abstract, but it was different than Cecil. I mean, Andrew. But Frank Kimbrough really loved Andrew, and I played a lot with Frank, and we talked about Andrew a lot. He loved the record too. He loved, and that was our introduction to get to play together, because he liked me playing on that album.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Frank. I mean, he's so sad that he passed away. I mean, he was one of the really the best voices like out there on piano. Such a composer.
We are all very sad that he's not here still.
Yeah, such a player. But he left some amazing music, which is
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. For sure.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. Rufus, just a final thought. Like, what's on the schedule for you for this year? I mean, you already mentioned this premiere of this symphonic orchestra thing, and
I just finished I was asked to go down to Princeton University to work with their big band, and Darcy James Argue was working with the band, and he conducted, and it was all my music, and so he was rehearsing the bands. So that was fun to actually get a chance to do that. I have a quintet that late July we're doing a festival. This is with there's a wonderful pianist, Roberta Pickett.
Yeah, wow,
she's playing piano, and Roxy Koss, tenor saxophone, woodwinds, and Kenneth Salters. He's the drummer that's playing on the Celebration on two of the pieces, and young trumpet player Freddie Hendrix. So been trying. Last October we were at Dizzy's in New York and for a week, and then but in July, and then I guess in October I'm doing something, a tribute to Eddie Harris, actually.
Really? Oh wow, beautiful.
Yeah, for the first time at Dizzy's. The day before, I think that week they're doing kind of tributes. The Monday of that week they're giving a tribute to Roy Hargrove, and Eddie Harris is the next day. I don't know what's after that. But I'm doing a project with Charles Tolliver.
Really? Oh man, that's fantastic.
In that week with the African Brass Coltrane's that record. You know that record?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to play that in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
At the Kennedy Center that week in mid-October. And so there's some nice
beautiful
situations like that. And in between, I'm writing and then I just got the confirmation about going to London next February. So I'm looking forward to that. So I have to keep my playing chops up. So, but I have no complaints, and life is good. And with all the chaos in the world, we're happy to be able to play music, and talk about music and musicians and the positive things of life,
Yeah.